He had not spoken a true word to another soul in 7 winters, until 12 Chiricahua women came to his gate in a thunderstorm, and the men hunting them were close enough to smell the wet creosote on his fence posts. Part 1. The Storm at Mercer's Gate. The desert did not measure hours by clocks but by the distance between lightning strikes. Tonight, the sky was restless, carved again and again with veins of white fire. Each flash threw the crooked fence posts of Dry Arrow Ridge into brief, skeletal life. Rain poured so hard it seemed to hammer the land flat, and every gust of wind came like a hand trying to tear the roof off the house. Inside, Caleb Mercer sat at a low table, with a broken bridle stretched across his knees. His hands worked the leather out of habit, but his mind wandered nowhere. That was how Mercer survived these last 8 years, with empty thoughts and small motions. He had buried his wife and daughter on the same day, dug 2 graves with his own hands, and after the second mound of earth was packed tight, he simply stopped speaking to the world. Solitude became a second skin, and silence was the only company he trusted, not to betray him. The fire in the hearth burned low. Its warmth did not reach far, leaving most of the room shrouded in shadow. On the mantel rested a rifle he had not fired in years, and a shaving mirror that had not seen his face in longer still. Beyond the walls, the storm beat against the boards like an uninvited guest. Mercer had learned to ignore the sound of weather, but tonight, a different sound joined it. A knock. At first, he thought it was the storm's trick, the branch of a mesquite tree snapping against the house. Then it came again, sharp and urgent, the rhythm of a fist, not wood on wood. His heart gave a single hard thump, the way a long idle pump shudders when primed. Nobody came to Mercer's door, not in 8 years. The knocking returned, louder, insistent. Between the cracks of thunder, a voice cut through. "Please, shelter. Only tonight." The voice was accented, syllables carrying the cadence of the Chiricahua tongue. Mercer stiffened. Old memories clawed their way back, men with painted faces, war cries on canyon walls, a skirmish that left his shoulder permanently crooked. He had sworn never to let that world cross his threshold again. His hand went automatically toward the Winchester on the mantel. But then, another sound carried through the wood. A baby's cry. Thin, broken, desperate. It struck Mercer harder than any memory could. He stood, bridle falling forgotten to the floor. The iron bar across the door weighed heavy in his palm as he touched it. 8 years of silence pressed against him, reminding him of the vow he had made. No more kindness. Kindness only buries you faster. He nearly let go. But the storm shoved rain into the seams of the cabin, and the cry came again, reminding him of his own daughter's voice in her last fevered night. With a grunt that was half curse and half surrender, Mercer lifted the bar. The door flew inward on a blast of rain. Lightning painted the porch white. There they were, 12 women, huddled together, drenched to their bones. Their dresses hung in tatters, heavy with mud. Blood striped one woman's temple. Another had her arm bound in cloth dark with seepage. At their front stood a tall woman, posture straight despite exhaustion, eyes black and unflinching. Her brow was split open, but she carried herself like a chief. She spoke in careful English. "We are Chiricahua. Our men are dead. We ran 3 days. Captain Pike hunts us. If we fall here, you will be blamed. If we live, we go at dawn. Only this night we ask." Behind her, a girl no older than 17 clutched a bundle. The baby inside wheezed, ribs fluttering like paper in wind. Mercer felt his chest pull tight, the scar of his own loss throbbing as if fresh. "You bring soldiers to my door," Mercer said. His voice was cracked, gravel ground down by years of disuse. "We bring truth," the tall woman replied. "And truth is dangerous to men like Pike." Lightning flashed again. Mercer saw in her the steadiness of someone who had already chosen death. If that was the road. He looked at the child one last time. The sound it made was not a cry anymore, but the soft, failing whistle of life slipping. He stepped back. "In," he said. The women moved quickly, not with panic, but with the efficiency of those who had rehearsed survival. Mud dripped from their hems onto his wooden floor. The girl with the baby collapsed near the hearth, rocking gently, whispering words in her tongue to soothe the infant. Others crouched low, wringing out hair, checking wounds. Only the tall woman Tala Nez, she finally named herself, remained standing. "Bar it again," she told him. "Pike will come with fire." Mercer slid the iron back into place, sealing them in. The storm clawed at the walls, but inside, a new tension coiled. He realized he had opened more than a door. He had opened a war. Through the shutter, torchlight flickered in the distance, riders moving through the rain. Mercer's hand brushed the rifle on the mantel. It felt both foreign and familiar. For 8 years, he had let his grief bury him. Tonight, the world had dug him back up, and he was not sure if that was salvation or a death sentence. Part 2: The Circle Tightens. The fire had burned down to embers, but the house pulsed with heat, all the same heat of bodies pressed close, heat of choices sealed. Caleb Mercer wiped the gunpowder haze from his eyes, and listened to the night draw its circle tighter. Colonel Everett Sloan's voice still hung in the rain like a noose. "You are surrounded," he'd said, and the torches beyond the ridge line weren't the flicker of a handful of men. They were the steady glow of an operation meant to end a story by force. Pike had been only a blade. Sloan was the hand that sharpened it. Mercer glanced at Tala. Her knife gleamed near the throat of the young lieutenant they had pulled from the back stair. He was barely grown, 20 at most, his chin trembling with the awareness that his own father's ring of fire was closing on him too. Blood striped his collar where the edge had kissed him shallow. "What's your name, boy?" Mercer asked, voice steady. The lieutenant swallowed. "Adrian Sloan." The words tumbled out not with pride, but with the shame of someone discovering that his name had become a weapon in another's mouth. Tala's grip tightened. "He tried to flank us like a wolf," she said. "Now he is ours. In an I need to be, and to be axary from." Mercer looked from the boy to the woman, then to the circle of light stretching wider in the yard. "Your father's company is ready to burn this place to ashes for you. That make you feel like much of a soldier?" Adrian's lips parted, but whatever answer he thought he had withered under the sound of his father's men calling positions through the rain. Pike's dead voice was already being replaced by Sloan's living commands. The circle was closing, the ledger of atrocities. While Tala held the boy, 2 of the women spread a saddlebag on Mercer's table. It was leather blackened by weather, and trimmed with brass snaps. Inside lay trinkets that didn't belong to soldiers, silver earrings bent from smoke, a child's shoe with the leather half melted, scraps of cloth scorched at the edges. Pike's trophies, carried like a book of unholy scripture. Tala's voice cracked for the first time as she touched the shoe. "This was my cousin's girl," she whispered. 7 years. Her laugh was louder than thunder. He carried her shoe as if it were a feather in his hat. Mercer felt the heat rise in his chest, an old heat, unwelcome and familiar. He had thought he had buried rage along with grief, but rage is a seed the ground never swallows. It waits for water. The rain had brought plenty. Adrian stared at the items, horror bleeding into his young face. "I didn't know," he whispered. "Father told us," he said, "they were raiders, that they struck settlers without cause." "Settlers?" Tala spat the word like poison. "We planted corn. We raised children. The only thing we raided was rainwater." Her knife pressed closer until Adrian's pulse beat against it. "Your father built his lies on our dead. The damned plan." Mercer slid the satchel of dynamite onto the table. "There's a way to wipe the whole circle out," he said. His voice was low, rough with the weight of memory. "The dam below the ridge. Blow it open. Let the storm fill the wash. Drown every man with a torch. It's the men." He paused, the room listening to the idea form itself. "But the baby out there, Eliza's baby, if she hasn't gotten far enough. Floodwater doesn't pick sides." Tala's eyes flickered. For a moment she looked at him as if measuring whether his mercy was weakness or strength. Then she shook her head. "We will not kill another child to balance the ones already lost." Mercer nodded slowly. "Then we need a different game. The ruse of panic." They planned by ember light, voices sharp and clipped. 4 women would hold the front, raising a racket that would sound like desperation. Overturned furniture, sporadic gunfire, cries loud enough to carry. Sloan's scouts would believe the ranch was a cornered nest about to collapse. Meanwhile, Mercer and Tala would lead the rest through the dark gullies behind the house. They would circle east, where the torchline thinned, and strike the reserves, the men holding horses, ammunition, and perhaps the woman with the child. Hit the spine instead of the skin. Break the circle where it thought itself strongest. Adrian Sloan, pale as lightning, stared at them in disbelief. "You'll never break my father's ring. He has 50 men." Mercer crouched in front of him, eyes level. 50 men looking in the wrong direction die the same as 5. Numbers don't matter when a plan's already in motion. "They say ground have tentative range askews were blandest of isles." The boy shook his head, a tear breaking loose. "He'll kill you all." "Then, let him try," Tala said. Her voice carried no bravado, only the weight of women who had already buried too much to be afraid of more. Cracks in the circle. The front room erupted in chaos exactly as scripted. Shots rang wild, screams of feigned panic rose, and Sloan's men surged closer, thinking victory minutes away. Rain glossed their torches, turning each flame into a blur. From the ridge's back, Mercer led Tala and 7 women through brush slick as oiled leather. They moved like storm shadows, crouching low, steps timed with thunder. Mercer's hand brushed a line of old traps he had laid in another life, iron jaws hidden under silt. He armed them now, the sharp click muffled by the storm. Horses stamped nervously beyond the light. Soldiers cursed as lines tangled. Then Mercer saw it. A wagon canvas near the corral, a shape rocking with the storm. Inside, a cry rose thin, real, alive. The baby. Eliza crouched beside, shielding with her body. 3 guards paced close, rifles slack, their attention more on the house than the cart. Mercer raised his hand for stillness. "There," he whispered. "That's where we cut." Tala's eyes were black stars in the rain. She nodded once. The women fanned left and right, blades sliding free, breath like smoke in the cold. Mercer adjusted his Winchester, feeling the weight of every choice pressing down. The circle was cracking. And once a circle cracks, it is no longer a prison. It becomes a trap for the men who drew it. Part 3. Fire without flame. The storm thinned, but the night did not grow easier. Rain had softened to a fine mist, the kind that clung to hair and lashes and carried every sound further than it should. From behind the wagon, Mercer could see the silhouettes of Sloan's men, their torches dripping light across mud and horseflank. The cart where Eliza crouched trembled whenever the child whimpered, and each sound cut through the black like a blade scraping glass. 3 guards, ordinary soldiers, not killers like Pike, but armed men following orders carved in blood. They paced with the restless impatience of men, waiting for the signal to finish what they'd been promised would be easy. Mercer lifted 2 fingers. Tala's women split like creek water, finding cracks, their bodies gliding into angles the soldiers never thought to watch. Mercer himself rose only halfway, moving with the quiet practiced long ago when he stalked coyotes raiding his fence line. His rifle was low but ready, boots sinking into muck with deliberate weight. "Evening," Mercer said into the rain, voice flat as a hand of cards laid down on a table. The nearest guard startled, his rifle jerking high. "Who?" He didn't finish. Tala stepped from shadow, knife finding the throat so fast the man only sighed before folding. The second turned, mouth opening, but one of the older Chiricahua women lunged from his blind side, spear haft cracking his jaw with a dull snap. The third managed to level his carbine, finger tightening until Mercer closed the distance and struck him down with the butt of the Winchester. The wet thud loud as a hammer on soaked wood. The fight ended before it began. No shouts carried, no torches flared brighter, only the sound of horses stamping, ears flicking at violence they felt but could not name. "Eliza," Mercer whispered, pulling back the wagon's canvas. Inside, the young woman's face was pale, streaked with rain and fear. Her eyes darted from his beard-shadowed face to Tala's bloody knife, then back to the baby, who wailed now, louder, unbothered by secrecy. "It's me," Mercer said, softer. "We've cleared the way. Time to move." She clutched the child tighter. "They'll kill us if we run. They'll kill us if we don't," Tala answered, her voice iron. "You want this child to breathe the next sunrise. You follow him." She jerked her chin at Mercer. Eliza nodded, trembling but willing. When she climbed down, Mercer steadied her elbow, as though she weighed nothing. The baby's cries tore holes in the night, each one risking discovery, but sometimes truth was louder than caution. A living child could not be hidden like a blade. The circle strains. From the ridge, the sound of chaos carried. The women inside Mercer's house had done their work well. Screams, overturned furniture, rifle reports spaced like panicked shots. Sloan's company believed the ranch was cracking. Torchlight swelled toward the front yard, drawing men away from the eastern line. "Now," Mercer hissed. They moved low, skirting the corral. Horses blew and shuffled, nervous at sense of blood. Tala led two women to cut tethers, slapping flanks, so the beasts scattered into the dark. Soldiers cursed as reins went slack, the line fraying further. Mercer felt the shift. The circle that had been airtight was leaking. Then Sloan's voice rose, deeper, harsher. "Hold the line! Push forward! The ranch is breaking!" It was the shout of a man who had mistaken noise for truth. Mercer almost smiled. The counterstroke. Mercer gave the signal. His women struck the reserve force in 3 motions. Knives kissed throats from behind. Spear hafts crushed collarbones. Tripwires pulled taut across mud, sent men sprawling into jaws of iron they never saw. The reserve line buckled with a confusion that tasted of betrayal, soldiers believing safety was behind them, only to find the storm carried teeth there too. Adrian Sloan, still bound at the wrist, had been dragged along by 2 of Tala's women. His face went white as he saw his father's men cut down like cattle at branding. "You don't know what you're doing," he stammered. "He'll never forgive this. He'll burn the territory to salt." Mercer shoved him against the wagon's wheel, eyes level. "Your father built his fire on lies. Tonight he learns lies burn the liar too." Gunfire cracked from the ranch front, real this time, not staged. One of Tala's women stumbled back into view, blood striping her arm. "They press harder," she gasped. "We dropped 2, but there are more." Mercer's jaw clenched. The ruse had bought time, but time bled fast. The colonel would soon smell the trick. Torch and smoke. Tala barked words in Chiricahua. One of the women upended a clay jar from her bundle, spilling resin-soaked tinder into wet grass. Another sparked flint. Fire licked, caught, and in seconds thick smoke belched upward, carried by wind into Sloan's line. Horses screamed, blinded. Torches guttered. Men cursed, hacking, retreating from what they thought was a blaze. In truth, it was more smoke than flame, a fire without fire, meant to blind, not burn. Through the haze, Mercer saw the colonel's silhouette, tall in the saddle, cape snapping. Sloan shouted for order, but his voice cracked on the edges. For the first time, doubt hung on him. "Good," Tala muttered. "Make him choke on his own circle." The sun's eyes. In the confusion, Adrian Sloan turned to Mercer. Rain streaked his face, plastered his blonde hair, made him look more like a boy than a soldier. His voice broke when he spoke. "You'll kill them all," he said. "My father, he'll die too." "Not if he drops his guns," Mercer replied. "But I doubt surrender sits in his bones." Adrian looked at Tala, at the women circling, at the baby pressed to Eliza's breast. Something flickered in him, then horror. Yes, but also the first fracture of belief. His lips trembled. "I didn't know it was this." He said we were defending settlers, that these people were savages. It was now grow. I devernant hennel. Tala's gaze cut into him. "Do I look savage to you, boy?" Adrian couldn't answer. His silence was the answer. The marshal's hoofbeats. As the smoke swirled and Sloan bellowed feudal orders, another sound intruded. Hooves many, but with a different rhythm. Not the uneven charge of Sloan's company, but the measured cadence of men riding in lines, trained for presence as much as battle. Mercer froze, ears tilting. Tala too stilled, head cocked. Over the mist, new lanterns bobbed into view, their glass panes hooded to keep the light tight. Voices called, not Sloan's, not his men's. Sharper, official, carrying the clipped tone of men who wrote their words afterward in reports. "United States Marshal's Office, hold your fire." The announcement cut across the storm like a bell. Sloan's line faltered, torches dipped, even Tala's knife hand trembled, not with fear but with the jolt of the unexpected. Adrian's mouth fell open. "The Marshals," he whispered. "Father said they'd never, but they had." The colonel cornered. Colonel Sloan rode forward into the new light, his cape heavy with rain, his voice raw. "This is my jurisdiction," he bellowed. "These are hostiles, fugitives. I command this action." The marshals ignored him. Riders fanned, forming a new ring that swallowed Sloan's. Their badges gleamed in lantern light like small suns. From among them, a stocky man with a thick mustache raised his hand. "Marshal Whitcomb, Territorial Office," he said. His voice carried calm authority sharpened by travel miles and courtrooms. "We've been watching, Sloan. We've got affidavits, witnesses. Tonight we've got eyes on you." The colonel's shoulders stiffened, a statue cracking in frost. His men shifted, uncertain now whom they served, the badge or the rank. Mercer exhaled, slow. The night had bent again. Not ended, no. Not yet, but bent enough that survival no longer felt like a gambler's bet thrown into rain. A fragile pause. Tala lowered her knife from Adrian's throat, though not far. Her eyes never left the boy's, dark as canyon shadow. "Your father's truth is about to be measured," she said. "Will you speak, or will you let his fire burn new graves?" Adrian swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing like a man who'd been given water after thirsting too long. He looked at Mercer, then at the baby in Eliza's arms, then back toward the marshal's lanterns. "I'll speak," he whispered. The storm seemed to hush, waiting. Even rain fell lighter, as if the sky too wanted to hear whether a son would damn his father or damn himself. Part 4. Law in the Rain. Lantern glass sighed under the rain, each flame a steady pupil in the dark. The horses of the marshals stood hip-shot and patient, trained to wait for law to catch up with trouble. Colonel Everett Sloan rode forward 3 lengths, cape dripping, boots dark with clay. The white of his gloves turned graveyard gray. "This is an army matter," he called, shaping the night with rank. "Hostiles have murdered a captain and men under the flag. Stand aside." Marshal Whitcomb did not raise his voice. He let the badge on his breast do that work. "What I see," he said, "is a ranch house torn by gunfire, a trail of burned homes to the south, and a captain who died in a doorway he had no warrant to kick." He lifted a waterproof packet from his coat. Affidavits from settlers, freighters, 3 troopers who deserted Pike's command, and a sutler's ledger for contraband jewelry. Names, dates, tallies of dead. Sloan's jaw set like iron cooling. "You'll answer to my general marshal, and you," Whitcomb replied, "will answer to a judge." Behind Mercer, Eliza clutched the baby and stared at the circle of lanterns, as if the light itself could be a fence to hold fear back. Tala stood with rain beaded along her hair like mercury, her knife lowered but not put away. Adrian Sloan, his wrists bound with a rains-cut thong, kept his eyes on nothing at all, the only safe direction in a night where every glance became a choice. "Lieutenant," Whitcomb said, turning the lantern of his regard, "is that your father?" Adrian's throat worked. "Yes, sir." "Were you with Captain Pike when he conducted actions at Cedar Draw, Chawla Flats, and Widow's Basin?" "Yes, sir." "Were those actions in response to armed raids?" Adrian's silence was the sound of a belief dying. "No, sir," he said at last. We went where there were no men at all. Only women, children. We were told it was necessary to pacify the area." The word came out bitter, like a penny sucked too long. "Captain Pike kept trinkets. He called them keepsakes." I looked away. Sloan's horse stepped. Iron rang on a stone. "Adrian," he said, and the name was both plea and order, "you don't understand the theater you're in. Speak no more." Whitcomb didn't look at the colonel. He looked at the boy. "And tonight?" Adrian lifted his face into the rain, as though water could scour him clean. "We rode here to burn this ranch. We were told it harbored fugitives. We were told to make a show." His breath caught. Shame put a tremble in it. "Captain Pike entered the house first. He died because he misjudged people who had more right to be afraid than he had to be brave." A hiss rose from Sloan's line, part anger, part the squeal of reins gripped too tight. Then a sergeant on the colonel's left kicked his mount forward, carbine half raised, eyes hard with the kind of courage that is only anger with a hat on. "We don't take orders from court clerks," he shouted. "String up the rancher. Grab the squaws. Finish what we—" The rest of the sentence never made it out. A shot cracked from the marshal's right wing, clean and authoritative. The sergeant pitched from the saddle, hit the mud with a sound like a sack of wet wheat, and did not move again. The world held its breath. Whitcomb lowered his pistol, as if setting down a pen. "Any man who raises a weapon at a federal officer tonight will be put into the ground before dawn, and named later. If there's time," he said. "No one will misspell the headstone." Sloan's men looked to their colonel the way crops look to weather. Sloan stared back at them and found, perhaps for the first time, less obedience than calculus. A few eased their rifles down. One crossed himself. Somewhere a horse blew hard, sharing the opinion that this was not its quarrel. "Surrender your sidearms, Colonel," Whitcomb said. "You will keep your dignity if not your command." The spread grade, to remind of active the calm. The colonel's eyes found Mercer then, as if the rancher were the one driving nails. "You," he said, low. "You put a rope around my son's neck and called it justice." Mercer stepped forward just enough to make language unnecessary. "Your son still has a neck because the woman you hunted chose not to cut it," he said. "You want to accuse someone of mercy. Point the way her knife didn't go." Tala's expression did not change, but the rain on her face could not hide the heat riding high in her. She took one step, then another, until she was close enough to Sloan that the steam of horse and woman braided in the air. "Listen," she said, and in that single word lay the weight of 1,000 silences she had been forced to keep. "We will speak our dead. You will hear them, and the men with books will write them. and the men with hammers will make them into letters on stone, and the men with badges will carry them like bullets in their pockets until the pockets wear through. She named them. She named the old hyena, whose hands cured hides and colic. Neche, who taught boys the songs that send elk willingly into the world. She named the young Doli, 7 summers, who laughed with her whole head. Kiona, who braided her sister's hair the morning the soldiers came. She named the men who had stood, and the women who had stood twice. With each name, one of Whitcomb's deputies wrote in a leather book, the nib scratching a tally against the storm. With each name, Adrian flinched, as if he had been given a lash he could not in honor refuse. With each name, something in Sloan's posture slowly came unmoored, not the pride that stayed, but its harbor. When Tala finished, her breath trembled once and steadied. "These are mine," she said. "They are not arithmetic in another man's report. They are not fuel for a budget or a speech. You brought torches to end us. We brought names to end you." Whitcomb shut the book. It made a quiet thump, louder than rifles. "Colonel Everett Sloan," he said, "you are under arrest on suspicion of conspiracy to commit murder. Murder under color of authority, destruction of property, and the suppression of evidence. You will give your sword to me if you care to keep it from the mud." Sloan stared at the marshal's ring, at the hill where his plan had died, at his son. Then he drew his saber, not in a flourish, not with romance, but with the small practical care of a man removing a sliver from his hand, and turned it to present the hilt. "Everett," he said to Adrian, not the boy's rank, not even his name exactly, but a mirror of his own spoken backward. "There are always wider maps. And greaters in with a live effer Cummins, brive my have to of live Myers." Adrian's eyes shone with rain and something uglier. "There are," he said, voice shaking, "and they have graves on them." 2 marshals rode in to take the colonel's bridle and blade. The men in blue yielded their guns by habit, relief crawling across more than one face like a blush they could not hide. The circle that had come to burn now held itself still by law, and stillness, for the first time tonight, did not feel like fear. A deputy raw-boned, with a scar that made him look perpetually skeptical, rode to the wagon. He tipped his hat at Eliza, peered at the baby. "Ma'am," he said, "you've got someplace to be?" "South, along the arroyo," Mercer answered for her. "San Miguel trading post first. Then Denver, if the trail holds." "Marshal give you an escort to the fork," the deputy said. "Can't spare more, can't spare less." The wounded were counted. One of Tala's women, the one with the spear hand like an old oak root, had taken a round high in the shoulder, and would carry that weather bell the rest of her life. 2 of Sloan's rank and file had bled out in the mud they'd meant to water with other people. Pike lay in Mercer's door with rain washing his boots clean. The first honest work water had done for him. Inside the house, Whitcomb laid his book on Mercer's table and opened it again. "We'll take statements," he said. "You can tell it straight, or you can tell it pretty. Straight is what sticks." His gaze went to Adrian. "You first, Lieutenant. While your courage is hot." Adrian swallowed. "Yes, sir." He looked to Mercer, as if asking which road of 2 bad ones had fewer thorns. "Tell it clean," Mercer said. "You get to live with it. Might as well be the truth you live with." The boy nodded. Words came difficult at the start, then faster, then steady. He did not flatter himself with ignorance beyond what he'd possessed. He did not spare Pike his sins. He did not spare his father his orders. When he faltered, Tala's eyes held him like a wire that does not break but keeps a man from falling too far off the path. When he finished, Whitcomb signed the page with the date, which the rain, steady again, drummed onto the roof like a witness's fingers. Outside, in the slow unwinding of crisis, men made small noises of being ordinary. Someone clearing a throat, someone offering a tin cup of coffee that tasted of smoke and relief, someone laughing once, wrong-footed, because the muscles didn't yet remember another use. Horses chewed wet grass. The ridge breathed. Whitcomb closed his book a final time. Tala Nez, he said, addressing her with the weight he gave to judges, you and your people will be escorted north in the morning, under federal protection. I'll be taking sworn statements again, at Fort Huachuca. Any marshal who forgets that promise will answer to me before he answers to God. You have my word, and the United States ink. Ink fades, Tala said. Good ink doesn't, Whitcomb answered. And if it does, we can write it again. Tala inclined her head no more than that, but enough to register that some languages can be spoken by men who did not grow up with them. He turned to Mercer. As for you, Mr. Mercer, you just turned your homestead into a docket. It won't be quiet here for a while. Investigators will come like crows after rain. You want to keep breathing in peace, you may need to find it in another county. I was thinking of trying a different sky, Mercer said. He looked past the marshal to Eliza, who rocked her child and stared at a tomorrow she had not dared name before tonight. But I'll see a mother and a baby to their door first. Whitcomb nodded once, a soldier's blessing. That's a good map. Sloan, dismounted now and handbound, stood between two deputies with his chin set in a way that made you understand how he'd convinced men to do things they didn't know they could survive. He caught Mercer's eye. For a heartbeat, the storm put a glass bell over them and let a truth ring. You think this ends because of a book, he said. Nothing ends. It changes uniform. Maybe, Mercer said. But if it changes into something that writes down the names before it fires a torch, I'll take that over your kind of ending. They moved then, the whole night moved toward a tented corner of Mercer's yard, where wet canvas promised hours of ink and statement, and the neat tying of knots in a story that refused to lie still. Tala settled her women near the kitchen door, and, with a glance, sent two to gather the small things in the house that could be eaten or mended. Adrian gave his testimony with his father 6 yards away, hearing every word, and having for once no power to change its course. Eliza fed the baby, and did not once look at the colonel. When it was Tala's turn to speak inside, Whitcomb set a second book on the table and drew his stub of pencil like a man drawing steel. She did not sit. She stood with rain dried on her face, and told it from first cinder to last scar. She did not dramatize, and she did not spare. When she finished, Whitcomb's fingers were gray with graphite, and his eyes were old with knowing. Tomorrow, Tala said, we ride north with the ones who lived. The road will be quiet. The road will not be safe. We have learned the difference. You'll have riders at your flanks, Whitcomb replied, and men behind who can read and men ahead who can listen. Then let them listen to this, Tala said. She touched the page with one fingertip, as if to make it warmer. The dead make a wind. You can hear it if you don't make too much noise with your own mouth. Outside, dawn had not yet come, but it was nearer than midnight. The rain slackened to a fall so fine it was only a taste on the tongue. Mercer stood in his doorway and looked out at the ridge. Pike's body was gone, carted to a tarp near the marshal's horses. The mud wrote its own entries in the story, with prints of boots and hooves, and the drag marks of a man who had run out of walking. Tala came to stand beside him, her shoulder almost touching his. They watched the lanterns wag, watched the marshal's silhouettes lean and straighten, watched the law set its stakes in the ground, like a man pitching a tent far from home. Tomorrow, she said, you take the woman and her child south. Tomorrow, Mercer said. What do you take after that? She asked. He worked a breath through a chest that had been too tight for years. Whatever the road gives, if I keep my hands honest, he said. Maybe a roof somewhere that needs building, maybe a herd that needs watching, maybe a place where I can sleep with my boots a little farther from the bed. Tala's mouth made a shape that might one day remember how to smile. Keep the mirror you used for the signal, she said. It will remind you that a small bright thing can turn a night. He looked at her, at the line of her jaw, at the oldness and the youth together in her eyes. I'll keep it, he said. You keep the book in there. And he jerked his chin toward Whitcomb's ledger, written so hard the ink bleeds through. We will, she said. The night let go another inch. Somewhere down in the wash, the dam hummed to itself with captured water and unspent force. It could have been a murderer. Tonight it would be a witness that did not have to say a word. Part 5. The morning after. The ridge exhaled. For the first time in 8 years, Caleb Mercer felt dawn arrive not as a trespass, but as a guest. The rain had thinned to a silver drizzle, a curtain the sun tore through in strands of gold. Horses steamed where they stood, and the marshal's lanterns dulled in daylight until they looked like small stars being put away for later. Pike's body had been carted off, Colonel Sloan stood under guard, and men who had carried torches now carried silence. Mercer leaned on the rail of what was left of his porch. The wood smelled of gunpowder and wet pine, the scars of last night etched into it like script no carpenter could sand out. Behind him, Whitcomb's deputies closed their books and spoke in low tones, the kind men use when they know history has just been written but not yet bound. Northbound, Tala Nez gathered her women by the corral. They looked fewer in daylight, but not smaller. Each carried the weight of the names they had spoken into the storm. 2 had been lost to wounds. The rest stood ready to ride north. Whitcomb promised an escort through the bad valleys, papers with federal ink, and rations packed in canvas sacks. Mercer watched Tala mount a bay mare with the ease of someone who had never forgotten what balance was. She turned her face toward the northern horizon, where hills sharpened against sky, and for a moment he saw not a refugee, not a warrior, but a woman choosing to live where her dead could not follow. She caught his gaze and held it. You'll take the woman south? I will, he said. Keep your eyes wide, Tala warned. Roads carry teeth. Then I'll carry teeth of my own. Something like a smile brushed her mouth. She wheeled her mare and led her kin north, their figures threading into the pale wash of daylight until they were shapes against light, then only memory against sky. Southbound, Eliza Ward stood awkwardly by the wagon, her infant nestled under a wool blanket. She looked younger now, as if daylight had peeled years off the fear she carried. When she glanced at Mercer, her eyes carried a question she didn't need to speak. Will the road hold? It will, Mercer said. I'll see you to San Miguel Crossing. From there the trail forks to Denver. You'll have company enough to finish it. The baby stirred, lips working as though already speaking into the world that had nearly snuffed her out. Mercer reached one finger to the bundle, and the tiny hand closed around it, warm, alive. It had been a long time since he had felt a grip that small. It made his chest ache in a place no bullet ever had. The colonel in chains. Colonel Sloan stood stiff as a fence post, wrists bound, eyes blazing in a face that had been built for command but now had only stone left to command. His son, Adrian, sat apart under another guard, staring at mud that held his father's reflection broken in puddles. Do you hate me now? The colonel asked, voice low. Adrian lifted his face, pale in dawn. No, he said. I see you now. Sloan's eyes shuddered. He turned his head away, as if the sight of his own son's honesty was a wound deeper than shackles. Mercer's road. Whitcomb approached, adjusting the brim of his hat. Your ranch is ruined, he said plainly. You'll find more questions than answers if you stay. Mercer nodded. It was never home after the graves. Maybe it wasn't meant to last. He looked south, where the arroyo ran like a dark vein through pale land. I'll see them safe to Denver. After that, there's a horizon full of work, and no end of places where men need roofs more than they need ghosts. Whitcomb extended his hand. Then may your hammer swing true. And if you ever tire of wandering, there's work for a steady man in the Marshal's service. Mercer shook it once, firm. I've had my share of killing, but maybe I'll build something that keeps law standing when men like Sloan try to knock it down. In Founder's Well. Closing. By the time the sun cleared the ridge, the yard was empty of soldiers and heavy with the quiet of things ended. Mercer saddled his dun mare, checked the rifle at his scabbard, and guided Eliza's wagon onto the track south. He didn't look back at the house until the bend hit it. The place was scarred, porch broken, windows smashed, but the chimney still lifted smoke as if to say, I stood, I saw, I will remember. North, 12 women carried their names into the hills. South, a mother and child carried their chance into tomorrow. And between them rode Caleb Mercer, no longer the man who hid from weather and memory, but a man who had chosen to live again. Years later, travelers would tell of the night a lonely rancher and a circle of Chiricahua women turned back an army on Dry Arrow Ridge. Some called it miracle, some called it vengeance, but those who had seen it with their own eyes knew better. It had not been miracle or vengeance. It had been the simple, hard choice to be human when cruelty asked for silence. And sometimes, in the Old West, that was enough to change the shape of the land itself. If the night of Caleb Mercer, Tala Nez, and the storm on Dry Arrow Ridge has stayed with you, then you know the frontier was never only land and law. It was a place where grief could harden into silence or soften into courage when strangers knocked. In the Old West, justice was never written just in ink, but in choices men and women carried through fire and rain. And sometimes, the boldest road a soul could take was not away from death, but back toward life. Subscribe and ride with me into the next tale, where dust hides secrets, where love fights to breathe, and where these Old West stories remind us that hope can still ride beside us, even in the darkest storm.